You're listening to the Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast.
Are you really only working 4 hours? Well, hey there, welcome back. It may have been a week since you last heard my voice, or perhaps it was just hours or minutes, or you're just going from one of the podcasts to the next. So if you're binging on me, just be careful. If it's been 4 hours, oh, what a great segue, Mark. 4 hours. I know that was terrible. It was really horribly constructed. But so the topic for today is the 4-hour day. I always like to keep my suggestions under the roof of, look, this is reality. The reality is you have to have a job and money and food and diet and kids and all those things that pull at you. That's what made me create Alchemy for Life, which is based on time, energy, and resources, which is spent on 5 facets. I get it. But once in a while, beyond the thought experiment of like liminal spaces and stuff like that, I like to introduce something that I think is very tangible based on my experience, but maybe a bit radical. And that's what today's topic is. The 4-hour workday. And if that sounds familiar, it's probably because it sounds a little bit like the 4-hour work week or the 4-hour body. Both are books which I recommend by Tim Ferriss, but the concept I'm talking about is completely unrelated to what he's talking about. So I'm going to suggest to you that you explore the concept and the possibility of having a 4-hour work day. So you're going to say, oh, really? Is that what you do, Mark? You sit in your big log cabin in the North Woods and you have a 4-hour day of working and then that's it, and then you take a nap? That's not what I'm saying. So let me back up before my proxy for you keeps asking me too many questions, because I'm putting myself in your shoes while I say this. So the concept of the 4-hour workday comes from some of the studies that have been coming out, some of the rumblings that have been catching up to things that I've been doing for quite some time. If you are a barista, or you work your conveyor belt, or what have you, and you do this thing that you do all day long, right? You have your 8-hour day and then you go home. The chances are that you definitely have 2 or more breaks in there. You have a lunch and so forth. And so if you subtract all that stuff, obviously it's not 8 hours or whatever. I mean, obviously, if you have a career where you are a director of this, that, or the other thing, you may be working a 9 or 10-hour day. But you're just as susceptible to what I'm about to say, which is that the studies have shown that people put really only about 4 hours of really productive work in during that time, regardless of how long it is. And if you think about it, if you say, okay, I have this thing I need to do, whether it's accomplish a task or complete a project or work on a thing, and I want to do it at my best. If you think about it and you come to me and you say, I need to do this thing. And I say, okay. And I put my hands together like I'm going to clap and they're touching. And then I start to expand them a little bit. And I go, okay, well, how much time do you have? Here you go. How about this little tiny bit of time? How about an hour and a half? Oh my God, right? Then your anxiety kicks in. There's no way I could do it in that amount of time. Oh my God. And I keep going. And you're like, yeah, I think I could do it in that amount of time. And I keep going and I keep expanding all the way to 8 or 9 or 10. And you're like, yeah, that would work. That's fine. Whatever. I'll get it done then. Well, yeah, because now you're like, yeah, I'll have lunch in there. I'll do this and this and this and this, right? Well, it's the same amount of work. It's the same amount of productivity and product. Obviously, we don't want somebody super, super stressed trying to do 4 hours of work in an hour. But what's the point of doing 4 hours of work in 8 hours? And you say, well, that's kind of what society's sort of built on. Well, society's sort of segmented in different pieces, isn't it? There's the crowd that basically shows up at X time and leaves at Y time. They have an expectation of doing either a certain amount of work or projects or answering the phone or something that's kind of linear. Well, I do this thing from this hour to this hour. I answer the phone. I schedule whatever's, right? I do help desk thing. I do this, I do that. It's a constant stream of stuff, just like you work at a restaurant or whatever. May I take your order? 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 Do you want to do that for 20 minutes or for 8 hours? It's like, well, you do that for 8 hours and you go home. Oh. Then there's the other camp that has specific things that they do, like a thing they need to accomplish and so forth. I've lived in that camp for quite some time now, being self-employed in one of my many lives here, secret identities and so forth, and doing technical things for people in one way or another. I have done everything I can typically to compress a tremendous amount of work, productivity, and so forth, if I do say so myself, within typically a 4-hour span. And my days were typically separated by a morning of a good 4 hours, and then actually eating and taking a breath, and then an afternoon of a good 4 hours. For some clients, I had done a full day where I would do 4 hours and 4 hours, but I would still try to segment things I was doing in that way. And I'm working my butt off, and there was no such thing as a break, And I was very exposed to lots of different cultures, small, large, family-owned, corporate, large corporate, and so forth. And the prevailing thing was that people knew they had a certain amount of time, meaning all freaking day, to do a thing. And if the thing they were doing was just processing, whether it was secretarial stuff, intellectual property, real estate, processing, moving of goods and services, they all approached it pretty much the same way. Oh, I have until 5, right? What else can I do in the meantime? Can I do this? Can I do that? I'm in no way saying anyone wasn't working hard. But according to the study, people typically get those 4 hours in, and then the rest is just sort of there. So the radical concept is, why not just work 4 hours and be done with it? And give it your all for 4 hours. Well, the reason being is because if you went to your boss and said, you know what, I'm really only working 4 hours for you. So I'll just do that 4 hours of worth of work from 8 to 12. And you pay me the same amount you've been doing. I'll give you the same amount of work. And of course, your boss would be like, wait, what? Wait. You've been screwing around for 4 hours? And you say, well, not exactly. You see, here's how it works. Read the following studies. But that's the reality of it, isn't it? Your boss wouldn't do that. The company wouldn't do that. They would say, screw that. It would be a very scary thing for a company to say, okay, we're going to have people work only 4 hours and then they get to go home. Obviously they would overlap stuff. You'd have this shift, you'd have this shift. Maybe half the people have the morning, half the people have the afternoon, whatever, depending on what their goods and services are, right? Clearly, if it's people answering tech support, phone calls, and things like that, there's a lot more coverage that needs to be accomplished. But in a perfect altruistic world, and not even altruistic, just a perfect world, the boss would get it. Oh, I don't have to keep the lights on or whatever. I'm getting the same amount of work. I give you the same amount of pay. Okay. On the flip side of this, the pushback is also from people who go, well, no, I'm not going to give you 4 hours of my all when I could kind of like cruise through this on my low setting and go, oh my God, that was kind of tough. And there was a little bit of pressure for 11 minutes. So I wonder what sales Amazon has, Or let me tell you about my vacation, the one I just took, the one I'm planning, and the one next year, right? I mean, I get that. I get that that's part of corporate America. I get that that's part of the work ethic or the way that work works. I get it. But the people like me, the people who have been paid for the intensity of their work, and as they've gotten better and better and better at their work, it takes them less time because they figure out really smart and they're getting really skilled at stuff. And they charge a good amount of money. That's the way that those people live. And those people are typically self-employed people who do contract work, consulting work, stuff like that. I'm going to apologize because I'm going to go over my time. So if we take that into our favorite friends, the creatives, ta-da, creatives would say, well, you're going to tell me that for the artwork I'm working on, I should commit 4 hours to it? Well, that's not how creativity works. And I would submit to you, yes, it does. Yes, it does. As somebody who's written a number of books, yes, it does. As somebody who has built highly focused development sites from scratch, yes, it does. As someone who has actually done aerial photography and then a lot of intense video processing work and editing, yes, it does. All the creative aspects of all those things also fit in a segment. And you can say, well, look, I have these spurts where I work 12 hours on something because I'm just obsessed with it. I get that. I totally get that. But if you want to give yourself some sort of guides or walls or expectations, things may not be so overwhelming. And that's one of the things that happens with creatives is things get a bit overwhelming. Oh my God. I mean, you think about it, you look at a blank piece of paper, it's the same thing as looking at like an editor with a blank screen and going, I gotta fill that with code. Or looking at, 7 minutes of video that you somehow have to make into 30 fantastic seconds. Or you fire up your copy of Mac Pages and you're like, okay, I got a title, right? It's a very interesting thing that we as humans, at least most of my audience, my audience, which is all over the world, hello, but, a good deal is in the United States, how we have sort of segmented the workday in a way for our first shift people into the 8 to 12 or the, 7 to 11 or whatever. Basically a day has two pieces in it. We say morning and we say afternoon. And then, of course, there's evening and night. But we have still segmented into morning and afternoon. So I would like you to consider, and I know depending on what you do for a living, this is going to be varying degrees of difficulty. And if you're like me, you maybe have been doing this consciously or self-consciously anyway. You may be working 8, 9, 10-hour days, but you've been segmenting it into 4 hours, right? It's worth exploring. It's worth exploring in your industry. And in fact, I would submit to you, if you're in a certain industry and say, well, that's not how it works in finance. That's not how it works in this. That's not how it works in that. I would say, really? How does it work for the consultants? Oh, well, yeah, they typically work. Yeah, well, they're coming in today. They're going to be here first thing in the morning and have coffee and set up all their laptops. And when are they leaving? Oh, at noon. Oh, interesting. Because the thing you don't want is burnout. You don't want your productivity and your accuracy to drop below a certain level. So imagine how your brain would work if you'd go, it's fiery intensity time right now. And you would go through that and you would just go, and you would turn it on maximum. And you'd be like, oh crap, I got to go to the bathroom. Like you literally get in the mindset where you're like having to go to the bathroom for a good half hour until you can't stand it anymore. But because you're in the zone, which is such a beautiful thing. No matter what you're doing, if you can get in the zone, nothing tops that. It's pure brain to paper. It's pure brain to machinery. It's pure brain to the thing that you're doing. There's nothing in the way. It just flows out of you. And those 4 hours will seem like 3 minutes. It works that way in writing. It works that way in technology. It works that way in speaking. It works that way in podcasting. It works that way in everything. I want to close by saying I first of all understand how absurd this may sound to a small part of the audience. But I also want to say, even though I always say I welcome your feedback and pushback, I very much welcome your pushback on this. I want this. I want to hear about this from you. In fact, I'll go the extra mile and say, if you have an impassioned pushback for me and say, oh my God, my life would be so much easier and different and better if I were to approach this my job. There's no way in hell this is going to work for me in my job. I would submit to you that I bet there is. I would submit to you that if we coached together, there would be a way to do that. The obvious way being, instead of working in your segment the way that you work it, you turn into a consultant for what you do for a living. And you approach it that way. So I welcome all that. You all know how to contact me. Please, I would welcome that. And I hope you got something out of this. I hope you're not going, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I hope it makes you explore a little bit, maybe even do a little Googling to see about the articles I'm talking about. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. Not everyone is super entrepreneurial spirit person who says, oh my God, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the sausage king of Chicago. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Because I understand there's also the burnout of wanting to be the entrepreneur and then working a 19-hour day, which is the opposite of what we're talking about. I think I'm starting to distill now, so we'll stop now. I allowed myself to go over, sorry. And I will see you next time. And thank you, as always, for listening. Bye-bye. Hey there, thanks for listening. You know I always enjoy your feedback. The prequel to The Sword and the Sunflower duet, called Upside Down, is now available. The Sword and the Sunflower is available as Kindle, paperback, and audiobook, with the other two, Amira and Upside Down, being available as Kindle and paperback. Well, actually, all three books are now available in hardcover.